see you guys in the dark.
So I'd just gotten out of a pretty significant relationship with someone of 4 years, nearly engaged and moving in together. When things fell apart, I took a good amount of time to be on my own and get my shit together again. When my friends began encouraging me to get back out there, needless to say, I really wasn't wanting anything at that point, nor looking for anything. I really wasn't wanting to do anything at that point, but they insisted that I at least just go out on a few casual dates for practice, just to kind of get my skills back up for when I was ready. I think they were honestly just worried because I became quite hermetic. So I matched with this girl, who's home from college for summer. She's a little out of the way for me, but was eager to meet. Seemed really interested, was even willing to come to my area. I really wasn't all that interested, to be truthful, but my friends again encouraged this. You know, practice. A date doesn't mean commitment. Whatever. I want to be very clear, though, that I was extremely honest and explicit with her that I was not looking for anything serious, or anything really at all. I was very forthcoming that I had gotten out of something serious, and I was just kind of encouraged to explore. She persisted and still wanted to meet, so we agreed to a casual lunch in a sports bar that week. I got there, and she was already waiting for me. I was a bit put off by how much different she looked than her pictures. Not trying to sound shallow or anything, but her pictures from Tinder easily had to be at least 5 years old, which I verified based on tattoos she had in person, versus ones she didn't in pictures. So I was a bit thrown off by that. I wasn't the least bit attracted to her, but I was there just to have new experiences anyway, right? No big deal. I felt so bad, because the entire time she seemed so incredibly shy and awkward. I even noticed her hand shaking when she reached for a glass, which I found endearing, honestly. So I did my best to get her talking and try to help her feel more relaxed. I asked her questions and chatted about things I figured you chat about on dates. Where she grew up, music she's into, school she goes to, her major, all that other stuff. All to which I literally received one-word answers. It went on like this for about an hour, and she was just not working with me at all. But I tried to keep room in my heart, because it was clear she was feeling anxious, and I understand on a personal level. Then she pulls out this book and says, "I got this for you." And I responded very grateful, thanking her and inquiring what it was about. Because hey, if someone wants to share a good read with me, I'm all for that. She looks at me funny and says in a very sudden but odd tone, "You're kidding, right?" I'm very confused and just kind of look at her like, "What?" And she says, "This is your favorite book. You told me this was your favorite book." To which I said, "No, I have never even heard of this before." So we concluded that she ultimately got me confused with someone else she must have been chatting with, which I honestly found hilarious. She was embarrassed, but I made light of it and said it sounded funny. 'Cause I get it. That's Tinder culture, I guess. So as we finished lunch, and I'm still receiving one-word answers despite our funny moment, I kind of become a bit suggestive that we should conclude our date by saying I had to get back to feed my animals and do some laundry. But she came very adamant on spending more time, and asked if we would do something else. I was genuinely trying to be a decent person, so I agreed, and we found a nearby park to walk, and that's where shit got weird. We sat on a park bench. Mind you, it's broad daylight. There's kids playing basketball nearby. Folks are jogging past us. I start trying to make conversation yet again, but still get the one-word answers. Then out of seemingly nowhere, without any warning whatsoever, she proceeds to just kiss me really aggressively, tongue and everything. I was honestly just so shocked I stood there frozen, not knowing what to do. I had this timid, shy woman who's really not made much conversation at all, who was just so nervous she was visibly shaking, just turned into a freaking bear mauling my face in like 10 seconds. My head was spinning with confusion and anxiety, and I swear it felt like it lasted forever, and I just prayed for it to stop. I was so put off, and honestly a bit afraid to do or say anything about it. Like, what do you even do in a situation? I was just hoping she'd pick up on my very obvious body language, that I wasn't reciprocating anything at all. I was completely unprepared for a situation like this. Then some really nasty guy just walks by, gawking and catcalling, and literally begins propositioning us into a three-way. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on? I need to get out of here. I was 1,000 different types of uncomfortable at this point. I end up managing to ward him off after telling him very politely, no, more than several times. All the while, she's just laughing. And I'm thinking, who even are you? Dr. Jekyll? Mr. Hyde? Over here? What the hell? So he leaves, and I'm insisting now that I need to leave and just go home. She seems to ignore what I'm saying and just gets very close to my face again and says, did you like that? Do you think I'm sexy? Do you want me? When I tell you I was so fucking nervous, I was like, I really need to go home. And she was like, can I come? And I told her very firmly no. She literally tried to persuade me to let her come back to my place with me, and I had to say no more than 3 times. So finally I'm home, and frankly just kind of shaken up. I hadn't really done the dating thing in quite a long time, but that felt very abnormal to me. She then texts me after she gets home and asks me out on a second date, and I was very kind, despite being incredibly uncomfortable. And I told her that I thought she was a cool chick, and I had a nice time, but I did not feel anything there. I reminded her I wasn't looking for anything. She then text-bombed me a bunch of crazy shit, saying how she didn't understand and was so confused, that she thought I was so into her and that things went great. I didn't respond to any of these because now she's continuing to cross my boundaries. I said what I needed to say, and I thought I was being decent, at least by being honest. So the texts continue, and I figured they're going to eventually stop, because it was our first date. How can someone be so upset over someone not reciprocating on a first date? They didn't stop, though. By the text, you would have thought she just ended a 2-year relationship, and she began calling, at which point I had to block her number. So Nightmare Tinder girl, please, for the love of everything, let's not ever meet again.
I once dated a stalker. However, what makes my story unusual is that she wasn't stalking me, although it ended up becoming my problem, as you'll see. Even though I wasn't the victim of her stalking, I didn't necessarily have a great relationship with her either. I met this girl, let's call her Annie, on a forum devoted to a video game we all loved. There were discussions about the game, and some light roleplay. This was about a decade ago, and I was young, stupid, had some problems that led to other poor decisions in my life, and had just ended my first serious relationship, which is due to this ex's bipolar disorder. Would have been an emotional roller coaster for anyone. Online, Annie was as sweet as could be, and was especially sympathetic about what had happened in my last relationship, claiming she had just gotten out of a chaotic relationship herself. We talked a lot, and we jokingly suggested getting together. Eventually, a major anime convention on the East Coast rolled around, and many members of the forum were attending, including myself, Annie, and the other person in this story, who I'll call Ron. I'd spoken to Ron a bit before the convention on the forum and AIM, and hadn't particularly liked him, but I didn't hate him either. He just seemed pretty standoffish and had a short temper. While he could be fun to talk to sometimes, I had to make sure to only talk about the sort of things we would on the forum, as you never knew what would set him off. The convention came, and Annie, Ron, and I all met in person for the first time, as well as some other members of the forum. I was there with another group, including my best friend, and had stated beforehand I'd be spending most of my time with them, but that I'd try to hang out with them when I could for photo ops and the like. However, upon meeting Annie, she immediately latched on to me, going on about how I was much cuter than she expected, and I was getting even sweeter in person than online. In hindsight, I can see she was playing on the vulnerability she knew I had, but at the time, I was immediately smitten. As a result, I spent most of the convention with her. I also spent a lot of time with Ron, who ended up being nastier in person than he was online, but for some reason, Annie adored him. Again, 20/20 hindsight, I think she thought that by fawning over me, she'd make him jealous. But he wasn't interested in the first place, so it didn't work. Well, the weekend came to an end. Near to the end of it, Ron was removed by security and banned from ever attending another after he beat the crap out of a girl who had tried to hug him. She had declined to press charges since he had asked her not to hug him, so she took part of the blame. With Ron out of the way now, Annie turned her focus entirely to me, or so I thought. By the end of the weekend, Annie had declared herself my girlfriend. You know how people talk about red flags? Annie might as well have been a living red flag. She called the shots throughout her short relationship, and when I said that, I mean I literally had no say in anything. She told me what our relationship status was, and when. She told me we were going out. Within days of that, she told me we were engaged. Because she lived in Ontario, and I lived in Maine, she refused to move for me. She demanded I move to Ohio with her. I didn't move, but I had begun making plans to do so when she abruptly told me, "This is all happening too fast. We're over." Well, no crap, it was moving fast. In the span of a week, we went from dating to engaged. And in less than 2 months, it was over. It was a wild ride, to say the least. And although I was upset at first when it ended, when I was in a better place mentally and emotionally, I was just immensely relieved to have her out of my life, or so I thought. The sign of things to come was when Annie admitted to me that the relationship with her girlfriend back home that she had claimed she had ended badly actually hadn't ended at all. But she totally intended to break it off before I got to Ohio. Shortly after that was our breakup, and then I started to get messages and calls from Ron. Apparently, although Annie was posting publicly everywhere on various social media her relationship status with me, she was actually bombarding him with instant messages, texts, and phone calls, professing her love to him and promising that she would drop me in a hot minute if he gave the word. He repeatedly told her he wasn't interested, blocked her on AIM, blocked her number, and left the forum. Ron messaged and called me to inform me of this. Although I told him repeatedly we'd already broken up, he seemed to believe Annie's behavior was my fault, and that it was my job to rein her in, although he never came out and told me so. I think Annie was telling him lies about me. As I later found out, he was trash-talking me elsewhere. Somehow, this convinced him that I was somehow responsible for Annie's stalking, and that I could put a kibosh on it if I wanted. I repeatedly told him we'd broken up, we weren't even speaking anymore, and if she was posing a serious problem, to call the cops. So here I am, with Annie stalking Ron blaming me for stalking while semi-stalking me. I have no idea how to get out of this. Annie actually moved to the state that Ron lived in, and started running into him in public places everywhere he went. She followed him home and would try to visit, insisting that she wasn't pursuing him. They were just friends. He told her to screw off in no certain terms. But undeterred, Annie still kept coming to his house, sometimes when he wasn't there, and Ron was still somehow convinced this was all my fault, so it was my responsibility to fix it. I changed my number eventually, as well as my online presence so that he wouldn't be able to find me on social media or the like. I really don't know how things ended with Ron and Annie. As I said, I eventually found Ron trash-talking me elsewhere, but it was for reasons unrelated to Annie. For 2 years, this guy carried a grudge against me because of my brief association with a crazy girl who was fixated on him. About a decade later, I've seen no sign of Ron or Annie anywhere online. I even went to the convention again the year after I met Annie, and although I had some issues regarding another relationship while there, I never saw Ron or Annie. So Ron, while I hope the stalking thing ends peacefully and nothing bad happened to you, and Annie, let's not meet again. It was my 18th birthday, and as a newly minted adult, I was enjoying my grown-upness by getting as drunk as I could. I'm with my friends in this pub in town, and we're gathered around a table. There's maybe 6 of us in total. A couple of tables over, there's a group of girls, and there's maybe 6 of them, One of them catches my eye when I look over, and she's very stunning. Long red hair, bright blue eyes, full pink lips. I look away and carry on drinking, but she keeps catching my eye again and again. We do that thing where you both catch each other looking, then pretend you weren't looking at all whilst going and doing it even more. Eventually, I need another drink, so I get up and head to the bar, and I notice her doing the same. At this point, I notice her body. She's short, but with a great figure. Breasts that are good and round and big. Small waist, wide hips, great butt. Everything. I'm pretty much fully in lust with this girl, and we've not even met yet. We get to the bar, and I let her order before me. She gets something like a lemonade, unusual for that pub. But I figured someone's got to be a designated driver, and it's probably her. I order a pint for myself, turn around to head back, and she's there, right behind me. We get to chatting, and she tells me her name's Helena. I make some kind of Shakespeare joke, and she laughs, and I'm in. The rest of the night, I talk to mostly her, though it's cool, because the other lads have descended on the group of girls at the other table. The evening wears on, and eventually we get to the, well, are you going to do it? Or just agree to meet each other again? Or screw off and pretend this never happened stage. We go for the former. We go back to my place, being very careful not to wake my parents up because I'm still, well, shit, and live at home. And have a great night. Long story short, we ended up going out for a while, always out somewhere. Then headed back to mine. Eventually we drift into actually being a couple. From there we start to do more couple-y things, and that's when the crazy leaks in. She starts arguing with me about every little thing imaginable, from not saying hello in the right way, to not being there to wake her up at precisely 6:01 in the morning, or whatever. Every argument escalates into whatever the heck she decides to rant about, and always ends the same way. She threatens to dump me. I coax her back. We kiss, do things. Everyone's happy. After maybe a month and a half of this or so, I get bored of it all. I do the decent thing and take her out for coffee to a cozy little cafe. Tell her in the best way that I can that we're not working out, and it's all pretty surprisingly admissible. Except it's not. The phone calls start, always from a private number, always of crying. At first to my mobile, then to my home phone, always a private number, always crying. I know she's faking it, because if I never answer the phone, my parents would have a friendly little chat, then hand the phone to me, and immediately it's like the Niagara Falls of freaking tears. Then the emails. Weird, ranty emails of gibberish and threats and pleading to take me back. Hundreds of them. There'd be days when they'd come every 5 minutes. Days when there'd be nothing at all. I changed my number to get rid of her, got a whole new phone number, and we went X directory with my number. Changed my email too. I still got them for about 6 months after, but eventually they just stopped. And that should have been the end of it. Little did I know. I started going online on various forums, games, etc. On one such forum, I struck up a friendly conversation with this girl on there. I know she was a girl because she showed me pictures of herself with a little scribbled, "Hi OFAB, I'm random username," and whatever, which is pretty conclusive, as evidence goes. We had a great time chatting and whatever, and we had so much in common, it was completely insane. Like, not only did she like the same things I did, but she was this utterly stunning little brunette, like a proper English rose. Anyway, eventually we started going out, having a little Skype chats. Things started out well, but over time, she got a bit too clingy for my liking. She'd ask me where I'd been if I was a minute late, or got jealous if she'd seen a picture of me on Facebook with another girl. She got upset at the slightest thing, or angry if I mentioned another girl's name, even if it was, "Oh, Louise said she liked my work," when Louise was the lecturer of my course. Eventually, I got angry, dumped her, and we had a nice clean break. I avoided those forums, changed my Skype, and that was that. Not learning my lesson at all. I went on different forums, Found another girl and got to know her too. This one was a tanned blonde, all boobs and legs and sexy, Australian accent as well. She liked most of the same things I did, with enough difference that we would teach each other how to do things, how to appreciate things, how to like things. She was laid back too, and compared to the latest ex, she was a breath of fresh air. If I got on Skype half an hour later than I said I would, she would be cool with it. If I spent a conversation talking about my lecturer, using her name in every dozen words, she'd bitch along with me, making me laugh, making me smile, making me love. Eventually, I talked of meeting her, though it was a long way from England to Sydney and expensive as anything. I was willing to fly to meet her because I wanted to see her face to face, to see the places she told me about, to go to the clubs and bars and restaurants she told me she loved. I wanted to hold her in my arms and kiss her and actually have a proper girlfriend again. She immediately broke up with me, saying I'd only be disappointed with the reality. Then came the latest girl. She was Canadian, brunette, something of a rock chick, completely different to my usual kind of girl. We met on some chat site I used when I was bored and got talking, swapped details, etc. She introduced me to a ton of music I'd never even considered listening to, and I did the same to her. If I complained about something, she told me to man the hell up. If I turned up late, she told me it was fine because time is something the man makes us believe in. She was the coolest freaking girl I'd ever known. Again, we dated on Skype and whatever. Again, we talked about meeting. Again, she broke up with me, saying that it had all just been in fun for whatever. It was cool, it was admissible, and fine, and that was that. All this happened over a couple of years, with me being with each girl somewhere between 4 to 6 months, and my between times maybe 1 to 3 months. I was a quick worker, and screw the rebound stuff. Anyway, I came back to my hometown for the holiday. I think it was reading week, or something like that. And being on campus then, I was wandering along the road, when who would I see but Psycho Girl. Rather than avoiding her, I carried on walking. She came up to me, said she had something to tell me, and we needed to talk, desperately. I made all kinds of excuses, but each one she batted aside until she wore me down. We went to the pub, and she told me something that basically terrified me. She hadn't wanted to give up on me, so she'd use what she knew of me to find places I'd go online. She'd made different accounts, lots of different accounts, in hopes that she'd find me, so she could talk to me and try to win me back. Except she'd make fake accounts, so I wouldn't immediately ignore her. See where this is going? Yep, every one of the girls I'd dated has been her, using pictures of friends, using fake accents, pretending not to know things she knew. She'd follow me across at least a dozen different websites, stalked me across hundreds of posts and threads, and all the time had made me believe I was talking to completely different women. I didn't date anyone for a couple of years after that. I don't know what came of her after that. She sort of disappeared from my life, and I haven't seen her since. I went out briefly with a couple of other girls, but only ones I'd met face to face, who didn't look anything like her at all. I don't know if she still follows me about online, or if she does, if she knows anything about this account. But if you're looking at this, hi Helena. I'll start by giving you some information about our relationship and what caused us to break up. I'll call her Crazy, as that's what she is. About 2 years ago or so, Crazy started calling and texting me after we had broken up for close to 6 months. At first, I just decided I was going to ignore her because I knew if I let her back in, things would just go to hell in a handbasket eventually. However, one night I had been drinking and got this lame sentimental feeling and decided to answer one of her texts. That was all it took. She started coming over, and eventually we ended up back together. We were together for close to 7 months before I finally got fed up with her and kicked her out of my apartment. She was physically abusive. If I didn't let her use my car whenever she wanted, give her money when she claimed she needed it, or basically do whatever she asked, she would have a tantrum like a 3-year-old and cause more drama than any one person could endure. During our time together, she managed to get herself in some real trouble after she beat some dude over the head with a beer mug at a local bar we'd frequent. What really ended the relationship was when she started using drugs and was bringing that stuff into my home. I tried getting her help, but she turned it around on me as if I was trying to change her. So I gave up and told her mother she needed to get her daughter and get her out of my place before I called the cops and had her removed myself. I told her we were done and I never wanted to hear from her again. At this point, I had given her multiple opportunities to change, but she refused. It made it seem like I was the problem. Whatever, I was done. The problem was, she wasn't. The day I finally ended it was the beginning of her tormenting. She started her attack by creating a Craigslist ad under the escorts section with a fake picture and my phone number as a contact. I received over 500 plus calls and text messages from random dudes looking to get some. This lasted for about a week before everything calmed down. If that wasn't enough, the same night while my phone is blowing up, I see the security guard from my apartment complex nosing around my car, shining his flashlight in the windows. I go outside and ask the guy, "Is there a problem?" He responds, "I got a report that this car here is abandoned and needs to be removed." I'm just like, that's my car, and I live in the apartment right above here. I ended up having to get my title and a driver's license to keep this guy from calling a towing company and having my things removed. The next day rolls around, still getting a massive amount of texts and calls through my whole workday, which was really pissing me off. I get home after work and sit down to try and relax when there is a knock on the door. I look out through the peephole and see some dude I've never met before standing outside. I don't answer. I wait for him to leave and then look out my balcony and see this guy on his phone standing right out front. I yelled out to him, "Hey, can I help you?" He responds, "Is Crazy here?" I'm just like, "No, that's my ex, and I kicked her out the other day. Maybe check her mom's house where she's staying." I end up talking to this guy further. Turns out that she set up a dinner date with him and gave the guy my address as an address to where she is staying. That night, another 3 guys showed up looking to have dinner dates with her. I had work the next day, and while I'm there, she starts sending me texts, pictures of the outside of my apartment with messages like, "It's quite breezy in the apartment with your patio door open, isn't it? And I hope your dog finds his way back home. He got out." So, needless to say, this is stressing me out. I'm almost positive at this time it's bullcrap, but there's always that chance Crazy actually broke in. I got home later to find my apartment the way I left it. The whole time, I'm ignoring her, hoping this will come to an end soon. Nope, it only escalates further. Once again, after work, I have a knock at my door while I'm watching TV. I check the peephole, and there are 2 police officers standing outside. I'm just thinking, now what the hell, as I'm opening the door and I'm greeted by 2 relatively large gentlemen in uniform with crappy looks on their faces. I'm just like, "Yes? Can I help you?" The officer asks me if I live here. "Yes. Is there a problem, officer?" He replies, "Only if you considered touching a young woman a problem. Can you provide your whereabouts for the last 2 hours?" "Well, I just got home from work like 45 minutes ago." "What do you mean touching? Who told you that?" This woman really stepped up her game, calling in a false police report and getting the cops to come question me about it. That was pretty bold of her. The cops respond, "I'm not at liberty to provide that information, but we'll need for you to provide some proof that you weren't in the Galt area between the hours of 2 and 5 this afternoon." Now I'm actually starting to get really mad, knowing that I'm 100% innocent of this alleged touching, And so I kind of get an attitude, which didn't really help my situation at the time, but I calmly respond, "If you want to go to my place of work and verify that I was there until 4, that will prove I had nothing to do with this. And furthermore, the person of accusing me of this crime are going to arrest them for filing a false police report, right?" And what I heard next floored me. The cop says, "I'm not so sure it's a false report. Your car is still warm, and you look guilty." Of course my car is still warm. I just drove home from work less than an hour ago, Einstein. Some freaking awesome detective work, Chief. They left, but before doing so, told me not to leave my apartment, as they would be back if my story didn't check out. Well, they never came back, and I called the police station multiple times to get an update on what they figured out. And you know, what they told me. No police report had been filed, and there was no record of any police being dispatched to my address on the day in question. I was seriously about to lose my shit. How can she continue to do this with no consequences whatsoever? Mind you, I'm still getting texts and calls. Less than in the beginning, but they are still coming in. I think it was like a week or so, and things went quiet. Minus the calls and texts, but even those weren't all that heavy anymore. I started to think that she was done with me, and I might be able to live my life normally, drama-free. Nope, I was wrong. I stop at my mailbox after work, about a week or so after the whole touching situation, and receive a letter from the post office that said I had changed my address, but if this was incorrect, to contact them to stop the mail forwarding. So I call them and tell them I haven't moved, nor have I filed out a change of address form, so there is no reason to forward my mail elsewhere. They assure me that my mail will continue coming to my current address, and that I had nothing to worry about. Well, they were full of it, because I didn't get a piece of mail for 2 months after that day. It took 3 phone calls and 2 visits to the local post office to get that stuff rectified. Now, had it not been me getting any mail, I wouldn't have been that mad about it, but once my mail was forwarded to the address where Crazy was getting it, she used that as an opportunity to get all my account information for the electric, gas, phone, cable, car, and banking information. I have extra security set up on my bank account, so that was safe, and my car payments weren't going away, but she managed to shut off my cable, my electric, and my gas. I also got phone calls from my phone company stating that changes would be applied to my account if I hadn't called. I was mad. I ended up paying an extra $300 in fees to get my gas and electric bills put back into my name, mainly because my apartment complex ended up paying the balances on both accounts and charged me for that. This was getting to be all too much. I tried calling the cops, and they just asked if I had gotten a restraining order. I explained that I tried, but she continued to evade being served, and after a period of time, if the person isn't served, the restraining order is no good. The response was, "We can't help you." Wow, thank you. Can't help me, but you follow up on a false police report, and then ignore that like it never happened? Gotta love the cops out here. However, I got a break. If you remember, she was arrested for smacking some dude over the head multiple times with a beer mug, right? Well, she finally had gotten convicted. It was given 3 months in jail for it. 3 months. Are you kidding me? There is no way I could go out and beat some guy with a glass object all willy-nilly and not go away for at least a year, if not longer. But somehow, she squeaked by with ease. Either way, that meant peace and quiet for at least that period of time. I was watching her status in jail online from time to make sure she was still locked up, when one day I checked and saw she had been released 2 days prior. In my head, I screamed as loud as humanly possible and started to get paranoid about this girl and what she might do next. Weeks went by and nothing. Finally, she's done. Given up. Or so I thought. A few weeks ago, it started with a text. A picture of a pregnancy test that showed positive. It came from a number I had never seen, so I wasn't sure who it was, but I had my suspicions. Figuring it was her, I texted back saying, "Ha ha 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 ha! Finally,
Any ties to you I had are broken. Have fun with the poor schmuck who knocked you up. I got a response. You obviously don't know who this is. Which was true, and really got me thinking, considering I had talked to a few other women since being with the ex. Either way, I ignored it and just hoped it would go away. Over the next week, after that, I kept getting texts. Only that one picture, nothing else. Once again, I kept ignoring until I got another text. This time it was a picture of a woman holding her stomach, showing that she was pregnant, minus the head. Immediately after that, another text saying, I guess we know who the fertile one out of the two of us is. That there told me it was the ex, as we actually tried to have a kid, but never were able to. So I responded back, awesome. Have a good life with whatever schmuck you managed to get to impregnate you. Thankfully it wasn't me. Now kindly, go away. She replied back with stupid insults that are irrelevant to the story, and I just ignored it, figuring she'd done what she wanted. Rubbed in the fact that I could possibly be sterile, which to me, that is a win-win. I can't have kids, and now she's got other stuff to deal with that'll keep her from bothering me. A week or so went by, and it's last week, Thursday. I am the type of person that tends to do stuff at the last minute, and when it comes to waking up in the morning to get to work, I sleep as late as I can, so when I get to my car, I need to leave right away, or I could end up being late. So I'm headed to my car, and notice something stuck to it. There are 3 magnets on my car with stupid slogans. I think one said something about being a cat lady or something. I really didn't pay attention as I peeled them off because I needed to get to work. What I did notice is someone super glued them to my car, so it wasn't easy getting them off. And I still have remnants of magnet on my car. That wasn't the worst of it, and to explain the second part, I must first tell a short story. I explained how Crazy got into using drugs. Well, one day, when I allowed her to use my car, she went to meet her brother in his apartment. They got into an argument. He owed her some drugs. He didn't have it on him. She thought he did, though. In turn, the brother wanted to leave. In an attempt to stop him, the dude used my car to barricade him in. And when she did, he got out and kicked my driver's side window, and then got back into his truck and proceeded to run into my car until she moved out of the way. So, I didn't have a driver's side window for the longest time. He didn't have insurance, and is a freaking tweaker, so getting money for him to fix the window was pretty much impossible. I'm also lazy and do things at the last minute, so I never got it fixed. The weather in California allows me to drive around with a broken window and not worry about the interior of my car getting ruined. Anyway, back to last week, Thursday. I now have magnets stuck to my car, and I'm about to get in when I see approximately 5 pounds of dog crap with open condoms just chilling on my driver's seat. You've got to be freaking kidding me. So I think to myself, as I start to look for something quick to clean this stuff up. Literally, out of my car. There was a plastic bag on the ground, so I grabbed it, and thankfully, it was dry, so I was able to get it quick and get it off my seat. I'm sure I still ended up sitting on some of it, but I didn't have the time to freaking waste, so I already was late and needed to get to work. I got there and told my boss. Thankfully, he's a cool guy, and let me take the first half hour of work to clean it out. Needless to say, I have replaced the driver's side window on my car. Now I wait. Wonder what the hell this girl has in store for me next. My guess? Something even more messed up. Now, I'm going to get 2 questions. The first, why haven't I changed my phone number? And the second, why haven't I moved? To answer the first, I have too many people that know my current number, and I am not going to let this girl win by inconveniencing myself and changing it. Second, I plan on moving, but I don't have the greatest rental history, so breaking my lease wouldn't help that in any means. So I'm sticking it out and hoping Crazy just goes away.
This is a long one and just downright sad, but I guess I will start at the beginning. I should mention, however, that I am into BDSM. I am a submissive, and I was looking for a mistress. I would go on websites posting my email address and other messaging app contact information. As well as you may have guessed, it was a bad idea. In a couple of weeks, I got an email. I no longer remember her name, but I will call her mistress. She told me just what I wanted to hear. She drew a contract together stating the rules I must follow. One rule that for some reason I still remember is that she could not allow me to mop the floors. Now I see that it was to make her character more believable, but the contract told me how to talk to her as in certain responses, and that I could not ask questions, and other ways of respecting her. I was young, and I was just a hormone-raging teenager, and this was turning me on big time. She would give me tasks to do, and I would do them happily, so I signed to this contract. Boom, I got myself a dominatrix girlfriend, or so I thought. Over the course of about 2 weeks, we talked daily. Only through text, however. We never met or called. She showed me a picture of herself, but now I realize it was obviously fake. But she gained my trust, nonetheless. I learned that she would buy jewelry for cheap in Dubai to sell it here in the US to make a large profit. She told me that she traveled and rarely was ever home, but that her home had a dungeon. She told me that I can come and visit her sometime very soon. This made me really excited whenever she brought this up. I was infatuated with what she was doing to me. The way she talked was exactly what I wanted to hear coming from a dominatrix. After about 2 or 3 weeks after we met, she told me that her shipment of jewelry was being held up in Dubai, and that she needed to get out of there and figure it out. It was no big deal to me, as I am not allowed to ask questions. Her plane was to leave that night. A couple of days passed and nothing. Then I got a text. She was asking me to do her a favor, a big favor. She told me that she was in trouble. She didn't get the shipment figured out, and now she just wanted to come back home. However, she had to pay $3,000 to get out of the country. I didn't even think about who she had to pay. I just believed her. She needed me, and I was going to be her hero. Blinded by lust and love, I listened and read her text message. It went something like this. She needed me to do this. Don't ask any questions. Just obey her. And if I did just that, I could come live with her in her big house, and she would buy me a new car. This is important. She had $3,000 in a bank account, but she could not access it since she was out of the country. Although she did know the routing and accounting numbers. She needed mine so she could send it to my bank account, and that I will then take it out and go to 3 different Walmarts to use their MoneyGram transferring service. Mistress said to use 3 different Walmarts because they had a money transfer cap. I recall hesitating on this. A red flag finally went off in my head, but I brushed it off and gave the numbers to her. Mistress then told me it would take a couple of days for the money to get to my account. But she needed the money now to buy food since she couldn't use her debit card there. She asked me for $300. I sent it to her using MoneyGram. Then she did the same the next day. I was more hesitant at this point, but she spun a story about how she had to sell her phone and buy a crappier one just to make do. So I sent her another $250 using the same method. Finally, the day came that the $3,000 was now in my account. I told her, and immediately she responds with the same method for transferring it all. Well, after work that day, I went to my bank and took it out. I remember being so amazed that I had $3,000 freaking dollars in my hand. I thought of ghosting her and just taking it. But then I wouldn't have a dominatrix girlfriend, and it took a long time to find me one. So I went to 3 different Walmarts and did my business. At least I kept the receipts. This is where it gets sad. I was living with my sister and her boyfriend at the time, and I had not told them about anything that I had been doing. It was late, and we were all smoking cigarettes on the porch. A small argument came out, and I abruptly announced that I was moving out anyways. They both looked at me in shock, and my sister started to cry. Very hard. We rarely ever fought, and this wasn't even a big fight, and now she is losing me. I felt awful, and told them both the whole story. From the nature of our relationship to paying her own way, they were surprised and really didn't talk much about it. Well, we all went to bed then, since it was tense, and I worked early the next morning. I woke up and drove to work. As I parked, I get a call. It's my bank, telling me how there was a suspicious activity and I needed to come in and meet with them. I was confused at this. I didn't understand how that was possible. After the call, it was about 10 minutes, and my dad calls me. Since his name was on the account as well, the bank even called him. He asked if I had anything to tell him. I broke down. I confessed what I had been doing to the last detail. He didn't say much, but that he will go to the bank after my shift. God, that shift was awful. My anxiety was through the roof. Now at the meeting, I again had to recount the whole thing for a third time in less than a day. The bank person told me that I was the victim of a romance scam, and that I should take what I have left in my account and close it right away. I did just what they told me. But before I told her how wrong she is, and that she wouldn't have since she had the contract, she really didn't give a shit about what I said. All through this, I never heard from Mistress, and now I had to go back home and tell my sister what was happening. I cried, and she forgave me and hugged me. I felt so awful. The next day, my dad calls me saying the bank wants us to pay them the $3,000. My dad and I decided to get a free consultation from a lawyer. He told us not to pay the bank and sue them, saying I didn't benefit at all from the scam. I had the receipts to even prove it. I went to the bank and showed them the receipts, and they still demanded the money. So my dad just paid them. I couldn't thank him enough for this. I really couldn't. He was my hero and took a major stress off my hands. I still had to pay him back, but obviously not right away. He really was there for me when I needed him the most. Later that night, Mistress texted me. She said she was back in the U.S. and was going to visit me and take me back to her place in 2 days. I remember messaging her back. I said, "You got what you wanted already. Why are you talking to me still?" She never responded. This story has no good ending at all. That was it. No justice that I know of. She probably wasn't even a woman. But to Mistress, I'm glad we never met, otherwise I'd be in jail for murder. You broke my heart, and definitely my bank account.
I am writing this because of a particular person that gives me anxiety and flashbacks to one of the most horrific nights of my life. She, to this very day, tries to contact me on every type of social media and doesn't get the hint that I don't want her in my life. This person is my dad's ex-girlfriend. I'll call her Jessica for the rest of this story. Some background of her. She apparently was a friend of my dad's in high school and rekindled some sort of relationship between them. My parents were divorced, and at the time of this story, I wasn't allowed to contact my own mother for legal reasons, so I was in my father's care. My dad is a very emotionally abused, and we never talked, or so much did anything but scream and fight at each other. He wasn't father of the year, and would leave me at home for hours at a time. He also did this to his girlfriend, Jessica. Jessica wasn't the sweetest person either. She had this attitude about her that screamed, "I'm better than you," and that she was the hottest woman in the world. Even though she looked plain, she would constantly start drama to the other housewives in the neighborhood and gossip about them. Some days she was a nice person, but others she was just as loathsome as my father. She and my dad would constantly fight over the way how the other treated them. I didn't pay attention to it, but it would all eventually come to a boil. It was the week of my 16th birthday. My father was in California to deliver some person's horse for a horse show, so he couldn't be there. So I was left with Jessica, the dogs, and my bird. On Friday, the day he was supposed to be coming back, I was fiddling with one of the presents, and it was becoming late into the night. I was in my bedroom, passing the time, until I heard rustling noises coming from my dad's room, and then weird, groaning, screaming noises. I was legitimately worried, because those noises were coming from Jessica, and I thought she had gotten hurt. What I didn't know, however, was that she had been drinking. She then started screaming like a fucking banshee, and I was afraid to go near that room. So I called out, "Hey, Jessica, are you alright in there? Do you need anything?" Apparently that was an invitation to her to come running at me. So here I was, a defenseless girl, facing off against a 50-year-old woman. She started hitting me and trying to scratch at me. I managed to grab her wrist and try to get her to tell me why she was doing this. She looked at me dead in the face, and with a low, cold voice, she growled, "I'm going to freaking kill you." I had enough. I pushed her off me and raced into the bedroom, locking the doors. I didn't realize it at the time that I should have called the cops on her, but I just prayed for my father to get home real soon. Finally, as if God answered my prayers, I heard my father coming through the door. He must have felt the atmosphere in the air, because he called out, "What the hell is going on?" I came rushing out in tears, telling him that it was Jessica, that she came out like a madman, slapping me and threatening to hurt me. I was shaking and terrified. I screamed, "I want her out of this house now!" I was truly afraid. He just stormed past me and up the stairs to their room. I don't remember much, but I assume she tried to blame it on me, like I was the one that attacked her. All I can remember is that the cops weren't called, and we just went to bed. That, however, isn't the end of the story. The next morning, she came into my room as I was watching TV, asking for forgiveness, acting as if we had a girl spat, then just her telling me she wanted to freaking kill me. I told her no, but Dad of course demanded I forgive her, or else. So I did, which would usher in the behavior of her doing horrible things to me, and then act like it was been nothing. Obviously, she and my father broke up and went on their separate ways. She tried to keep in touch with me, and I was nice to her out of politeness. It wasn't until I was in my freshman year in college that she would start up again. I did have a Facebook at the time, but I never did anything about it because I absolutely hate Facebook, and it was my first few weeks of school. I was busy and barely checked it. When I did check it, I received a nasty, childish message from her, all because I didn't accept her friend request. She proceeded to tell me that I was just as nasty and immature as my father, that he and I used her as a slave, even though I was her bitching buddy, as she complained about my father and all the other women in the neighborhood. Also, what struck a note was, she said that if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been in college. Last time I checked, all she did was tell me the school's name. I myself did the rest of the work. She even called me in the middle of my drawing class just to bitch at me. So I proceeded to email her, telling her to never contact me again, and to never contact my dad either, that I didn't appreciate her immaturity, and that I was only nice to her because of my father. Other than that, I never wanted anything to do with her. Since that message, for 2 years, she tried contacting me on social media, acting as if nothing happened, and that we were good friends. Even emailing her again to leave me alone, and she said that I was being crazy. I had since gotten into contact with my biological mother and told her this. She just flipped and told me if she contacted me again, she will threaten her with a lawsuit. Then one day, just a few weeks ago, I was on my YouTube, and I got a message. Lo and behold, it was her. All it said was, "Hello, Lindsay. Nice blue hair." Since my icon at the time was when I had blue hair, I told her off, and then called my mother in tears. She was fuming that this woman wouldn't leave me alone, and get the hint that I don't want to talk to her ever again. All my mother told me was that she was going to settle this once and for all. Since then, I haven't gotten a message for weeks. But I know my mother didn't do anything illegal. Probably just scared her off. So long, Jessica. I never want you in my life again. Growing up, my parents were incredibly strict and overprotective. No sleepovers, no boys, no going anywhere without their explicit approval after taking down who I was with and their phone numbers, their parents' phone numbers, and exactly what time I was expected to be back. And definitely no dates. I rarely even went out with friends. Going to see a movie on Saturday was a special occasion. The only place I can get around my parents' rigid rules was online, where, because they didn't know how to use the computer, they never monitored me. That's why in high school, I rebelled the only way I knew how. I started a blog. Yep, I was 17 and ran an erotic blog. No, not porn. More like photos of myself wearing very little clothing, in bed, everything just so covered, for the purpose of anonymity. None of the photos showed my entire face, just my mouth, or my jawline, the arch of my neck, never my eyes, though. Interspersed with photos were the blog's entries, the life of my normally blessed alter ego, Claire. Claire was completely fictional, and therefore, she was a lot of things I wasn't. Primarily social and sexually active. I would fabricate stories of dates, affairs, sexual experimentation, just dumb romance novel type stuff. Living through this confident, beautiful made-up girl, I fancied myself an alright writer back then, but looking back, it's pretty funny now, because it was probably mostly just drivel. But I enjoyed running it, and my readers seemed to like it a lot too. You'd think it would have been dirty old men, but I had quite a few women readers too, who told me how I was helping them become more confident as well. There was something so exhilarating about having people be drawn to you online when you're so lonely and cloistered in life. Anyway, fast forward 3 years. By now I was halfway across the country in college, out from under my parents' rule. I had a few good friends, and I was doing pretty well. I still had trouble being very social because I was so unused to it. But at least I wasn't so lonely anymore. I hadn't updated the blog in over 2 years, and honestly, most people forgotten all about it. I also had a boyfriend. His name was David, and we met in a history seminar fall my sophomore year. He was tall, lovely, and kind. Stuck past our awkward first date when I, shy, and still mostly petrified of social interaction, could barely string together 10 complete sentences with him. But he seemed to like that I was so shy. He was, in contrast, outgoing and forward, making friends wherever he went. He would constantly tell me it was cute that I blushed when people talked to me, or say how I should be glad that he was with me to facilitate conversation with other people. One time, he told me I was lucky he had stuck around because no other guy would have bothered. I was so affection-starved that I was convinced that he was right. One day, about 3 months into our relationship, over Christmas break, I got a call from him at home. When I picked up, the first thing he said was, "Who's Claire?" It took a second, but I realized he must have been referring to my entire body went cold. How was this possible? How could he have found out? What? I said. My heart pounded, my mind raced, and I had no idea how he had found the blog. Could I possibly deny it? There was nothing on that entire website that linked back to my real name or email address. I had made sure of that. None of the photos had shown my face, but they showed enough that if he knew me in real life, you could probably be able to tell it was me. Feeling cornered, I told him I could talk to him later, and hung up. I spent that whole day on the verge of a panic attack. Finally, I realized I had to just admit it. So I called him back, told him while I was crying all over the place about all the reasons I had written and maintained this blog, and eventually, he said, "It's okay. I think I understand." At some point, I asked him how he had found out, and he told me that an ex-girlfriend of his had seen posts on Facebook of us together, went on Google to search for me, and somehow turned up this blog. The link to which he has sent David. "Sorry," he told me. "I don't talk to her anymore. She just still bothers me all the time. She's kind of psycho." I was a little upset at that, but I didn't want to annoy him any further, so I didn't press the issue. Things went mostly back to normal. Then the emails started up again. I woke up to the first one about a week later. It had been sent at 3 a.m. and was from some blatantly fake address or something like that. All it said was, "You're disgusting." I realized it must have been from David's psycho ex. I was a little unnerved, but I just deleted and ignored it. But the emails didn't stop. They kept coming. At least one, sometimes two a night. Always from a new fake email. Always time-stamped exactly 3 or 4 a.m. The contents of the emails began to increase in the same level of vitriol. First it was more of the same, variations of "you are so gross," or "you're mussed up." Then she would send me copies of the photos from my blog, with horrible things written across them, like "fat slut" or "die whore." I showed David the emails and asked if he could make her stop, but he just shrugged and said it was out of his control. It kept escalating. He started mentioning my friends' names in the emails. Things like, "I showed Rachel and Alex your sick website. You're disgusting." Or, "I told Evan and James. They act like they're your friends, but behind your back, they all think you're disgusting." Sometimes she would pretend to be one of my friends and write things like, "I said hi to you on campus yesterday, and you think I like hanging out with you, but I know what you really are. You're just a whore." Once she copied and pasted an entire blog entry into the body of an email. It was non-stop, night after night. I would wake up in the morning terrified of seeing another email from her in my inbox. I stopped opening them. I was constantly stressed. I knew for sure it was actually sent my photos around to everyone I knew. I lost sleep, lost weight. I begged David to make her stop, but he kept saying there was nothing that he could do. Things with David were deteriorating as well. He was annoyed that I kept bringing up the emails. He began to make it sound as though it were all my fault. He said it was hard to believe that I didn't actually done all those sexual things I had written about. This was the kicker. His ex was from my hometown. He said she had told him stories that she'd heard from people I went to high school with about all the dirty things I used to do. Orgies, bondage, hard drugs. How could I lie to him and trick him into believing I was a shy virgin? He wanted to know the truth. I told him one of those things were true. "She's obviously making it up. Do you really believe her over me?" I asked. "I don't know what to believe," he said. He told me I had become untrustworthy. As twisted as it was, I started to believe that too. I apologized to him over and over until finally he forgave me and told me it was all right, that he believed me, that I was lucky he understood and would stay with me, because who else would? I had never been so relieved. I was so lucky. I was so lucky, wasn't I? We had been taking things really slow, physically, because I actually was a virgin, and regardless of making believe Claire's make-believe sexcapades, anything sex-related still made me incredibly nervous. But after that, I had sex with David for the first time because I felt like I owed him. He had stayed with me. I was so lucky. I didn't enjoy it. Afterwards, he whispered, "I believe you. You really have never had sex before. It felt sickly, like winning." Eventually, after about 2 months, the ex must have gotten bored because the emails slowed, and then they just suddenly stopped. David broke up with me shortly after, cruelly and unkindly the day after my 21st birthday. I was a complete wreck for a while, but hey, life goes on. 3 months or so after that, I got another email from this Claire69@hotmail.com at 3 a.m. "I can't believe you haven't hurt yourself. You should have." For the first time, I responded, "We're not even dating anymore. You're pathetic. Get a fucking life." That was the last I ever heard from her. To this day, I don't know her name. I don't know how she found my blog, or how she knew the names of my friends, or why she was so hell-bent on making me miserable for so long. Even now, when I get Facebook messages or emails from people I don't know, my first reaction is a panic. Of course, I have since realized that I was not at all lucky in my relationship, nor was David the sweet guy that I thought he was at the time. I understand now that it hadn't been my fault. I owed him nothing. It's been 5 years, but I haven't been in a relationship since. I don't know if I could. I think the worst thing is, I used to enjoy writing. At one time, I was proud of my blog, because as small and insignificant as it was something I had created. Even though it was make-believe, it was still mine. They had taken something I had been proud of and turned it into a source of shame. I don't like to write anymore. Even now, I get angry at how they've taken that from me, at how easily I was fooled, how stupid I was, how naive.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.